Welcome to another episode of the SDSS podcast with your hosts, Tim Keefe and Andreas Wieman. Today, we delve into a critical yet often neglected topic in business: defining success. How do organizations across different sectors, be it nonprofits, universities, or large corporations, align on what success means? Join Tim and Andreas as they unpack the complexities of key performance indicators, KPIs, the challenges of achieving alignment across departments, and the consultative approaches that can redefine how success is achieved in a matrixed corporate environment. Don't miss this insightful exploration into aligning business strategies for effective outcomes. Let's begin.
Hi, everybody. This is Tim Keefe with Transform CX, and welcome to another SDSS podcast with my co-author and conspirator, Mr. Andreas Wieman. And just wanted to say thanks for everybody for joining us. And let me hand it over to Andreas and introduce the topic of the day.
Yeah, sorry, I was updating my LinkedIn title to co-conspirator. I think that has a pretty good buzz term kind of ring to it. We may start a trending here.
Today, very Watergate for those who are history buffs.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about, I think, a pretty important topic that I just don't think has enough conversation and visibility into organizations right now. And it's going to sound a bit counterintuitive, but it's defining success. Like, how do we define this in organizations, whether you're a nonprofit, you're a university, with your students, patient experience, and on the medical side with everything that's going on there, and just large companies. Like, how do we define success and how do we work towards that as a team? Unless you're a one-man show, then you clearly know what it is, and it's up to you to go. But most of the companies that we work with and consult for and advise, they're large matrices organizations, and I don't know, I think it's a really interesting topic because it's so simplistic, but I think it's something that maybe needs to be talked about a little bit more. So anyways, I don't want to banter on by myself. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
No, I think you're right. I think one of the big challenges is, what is success for a particular organization? And, one of the things I used to do or still do as a consultant is you'll be in a C-suite and you'll go around the table and ask each executive how they define success. And guess what? It's often different. Like, sales will be talking about conversion rates. The HR organization will be talking about employee retention, et cetera. And you're kind of like, all of those are important attributes of business success, but are they all aligned around the same common outcome? For a period of time, I worked for a guy named Stephen Elop at Macromedia, and he went on to be very famous at Nokia. But Stephen used to say to me all the time, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the money in the treasury account at the end of the quarter. That's what matters. And, there's something to be said about that, because you could hit all that check boxes and say, we went to all these conferences, we did this, we hired this number of people. But at the end of the day, if we're not hitting our financial targets that are putting money in the bank that allow the business to go forward, then have we been successful? And the answer I think is not true. So to your point, I think we see often organizations kind of scrambling a little bit, like, what are they measuring? Right. Which is this kind of, we use this term KPI frequently, key performance indicator, but we often use it and apply it to an operational metric like average handle time, or which is a good one in contact center industry. We use it all the time, right? Average handle time is really important because it tells you how many resources you need against a certain volume, but it really doesn't get at the outcome. And I think this is the difference, right? So anyway, kind of going back and forth on this, as you think about it, what do you think needs to be different? What do we need to bring differently to the table as we have this conversation?
Well, like exactly what you just said. You said it very concisely, but and you know this too, but for the audience, what Tim just described is actually immensely complex. And what I mean by that, and I'm talking specifically to the customer experience, the CX contact center and average handle time metric, So for those of you that don't know, it's average interaction time or average handle time. So how many seconds does it take for a, a customer representative to resolve the inquiry from a inbound customer contact, whether it's a chat, whether it's a voice phone call, it's a text message, SMS message, etc. And so what companies do is they figure out, okay, well, how many customer inquiries, outreaches are going to occur during the time of day of week, and how many people do we need there to represent our company and resolve the issues that our customers are having. There's a whole group of people, software industry, that stood up to figure that out and figure that out not optimally. I'll go on record and say, not because the tools and software and people are bad, but it's immensely complex, and there's so many interdependencies on that. And so what Tim just said pretty easily, it goes on in every organization that's out there. There's some average handle time goal, and then you've got to talk to the company representative about how do you use the tools to resolve the customer's issue. But oh, by the way, you got to do it within this time frame, this average handle time goal. And so again, it's immensely complex because now you're involving more humans, and you need the output of the human behavior to conform to this number. And then I love it when I go to the C-suite or whoever I'm talking to and say, hey, how did you come up with that goal? Can you explain mathematically? It's just mathematical goal. Can you explain to me mathematically how this goal was arrived at? And usually they can't, or they refer me to a capacity planning or some software or something like that. So my whole point on being a bit long-winded now is that, one, Tim just explained it, and it is immensely complicated. But here's the like ripple effect that I'm trying to impress upon everyone right now. Success is a personal concept, and it depends on that individual values and goals and priorities. It's not a one size fits all. So to have that one kind of definition of success, and if you're a large company or an enterprise, you're a corporation, you've got to ensure that that message of success, that definition of success, is personalized to each of the individuals that need to make the roll up of that from the bottom up
Yep.
happen, actually come to
Yep.
the outcomes that Tim is talking about. Does all that make sense, Tim?
Well, I think what you're getting at is something you and I talk about a lot, which is how do I align what I'm doing in the moment to the P&L of the organization that I'm reporting up into. So, if I understood correctly, I think, for example, is like we have a couple of clients that are in the automotive sales space. And,
Mhm.
the client would say at the end of the day, if I don't sell cars, the rest of it doesn't matter. And what they're looking for is partners that help them sell cars. And and the challenge can be that, for example, let's say I'm a contact center provider and I'm engaged by this company to help them sell vehicles. And I'm looking at my job to be, oh, I've got to make sure that I touch every lead or I respond to every lead within 30 minutes, because I know that if I don't get to it in 30 minutes, it'll be a lost lead. Okay, that's great. However, what am I actually getting, right? If you could say, yes, 100% of the time I responded in 30 minutes. How did I respond? Well, I sent a text message or I called, yet
Mhm.
I never connected with the customer and therefore wasn't able to move them further down the funnel. So the challenge could be, I say I'm meeting my targets of responding within 30 minutes to every lead, but am I really moving the customer forward to get them to a conversion to actually buy a vehicle? And this is where I think there's this back and forth sometimes between vendors and the buyer of the services, who are struggling sometimes and saying, we're not aligned. You,
Yep.
Mr. Vendor, is saying, I'm doing my job. I'm responding within 30 minutes because that's what the contract said. And yet the buyer is saying, yeah, but at the end of the day, I'm spending money, a lot of money with you, and yet I'm not converting. So, and I think this is what they're looking for, which is, how do you help me? Maybe my metric was wrong. Maybe the thing I'm measuring you against is the wrong metric to actually get to the outcome that defines success. And I think this is where companies have to start being more consultative in their engagement with their customers and not just be a vendor.
Right. Well,
It's all, go
sorry,
ahead.
that's one important piece right there, though, Tim. Just the terminology vendor. Usually, up through, I don't know, like let's say 2018 or something, pre-pandemic, you could operate in an environment where you had a company that outsourced and they just had a bunch of vendor partners. All right. I wouldn't even call them partners, just vendors. When you have a vendor, they're just out there to do what you tell them to do. And so I think a lot of companies don't feel like a partner or consultative because they weren't told to do that. This is going to sound kind of silly, but I'm telling you, this is what I've seen out
But look
in
at the way the
reality.
RFPs, well, exactly to your point. I mean, look at the way RFPs are written. They don't allow for any consultative engagement, right? They're very, very
Right.
prescriptive and what they want. It's kind of like you will provide X number of agents that will respond to
Yeah.
leads within this minutes with an average handle time of this, blah, blah, blah. And it's very prescriptive in the contract. And then everybody goes, okay, well, I can only operate within what you've allowed me to do from a contract perspective. And therefore I operate to that contract. And everybody sits there and points fingers at each other and says, but you're costing me a lot of money and not delivering sales. And the vendor will say, but that's not my job. But my job is what you contracted me for,
Exactly.
was to provide labor to perform these transactions and check these boxes. So, and I think both sides are both right and wrong in that conversation.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And they shouldn't have, well, the contract was written this way, is my sarcastic voice. The contract was written this way, so I'm not doing it. Like, no, have a conversation with them. Talk to your client and say, a lot of times, honestly, they're big matrices organizations too. Even the way the RFP is written, guess what? Legal has a hand in that, and the contracts team has a hand in that. And a lot of times it's an email over to the business leader saying, hey, this is how the contract is going to be written. Do you approve of it? They look at it real quick and they're like, yeah, approved. You know what I mean? There's so much of that goes on in the business. You guys may think I'm kidding. This is how reality works right now. And then when you have a disagreement with a partner, they're going to revert back to the contract language, and that's the hill to die on, because that's where the litigation or arbitration will go to. And so in this time right now, where time, resources, everything is extremely challenging. I don't know how many people saw this, but the first quarter GDP in the US was adjusted down even further. I think it was like
Mm-hmm.
1.3. Okay. That's just another objectively measurable output that I'm seeing that validates kind of what you and I've been talking about for I don't know how many quarters now. It's challenging out there. And so at the top of that, you know, self creation of challenges in some cases is if you can't align on what a successful outcome is. I think we need to add that word in there in that lexicon. It's not just a success, defining a successful outcome.
Right.
I think there's going to be misalignment. And if you have misalignment at the top, like you were describing earlier at the C-suite level, then all of the actual, workers that have to execute to provide the output that drives that outcome, not just executives, right? But the actual frontline workers, then there's going to be misalignment. They're not going to know where their place is and what they have to do to be an individual contributor of 1,000 individual contributors that have that roll-up effect of hitting and achieving that successful outcome that was created by the executive team, the
Yeah.
C-suite.
It's fascinating because I get to play my age card here a little bit, but back in the 90s and still in different parts of the world, Africa, Europe in particular, you see these international standards organization approach to this. If you've ever done like an ISO 2000 or ISO 9000 audit,
Right.
so the ISO standards are built around different things from quality assurance to customer experience to engineering guidance, et cetera. But the core of an ISO approach is, number one, are all your processes documented? Number one. Number two, are your employees familiar with all of the processes they're responsible for? And number three, do they understand how those processes contribute to the business outcomes that they're responsible for? So, I think it's kind of interesting that there are pretty sophisticated tools out there that have come and gone in popularity at different times. But, and it kind of goes back to some, you and I have talked about this many times, like the ability to walk up to anybody and say, so, the things that you're responsible for, how do they tie back to success? First off,
Yeah.
do you even know what success is? Some people might say it's business growth. Others might say it's customer retention. Others might say it's, security compliance. I mean, these are all real business targets that have to be met, but do people understand how their role aligns with that? And I think we've seen in many organizations, hence the name of our book, Stop Doing Stupid Stuff. There are a lot of parts of the organization that kind of evolve over time that have lost sight of their connection to the outcomes. And they just are doing it almost through inertia rather than because they understand the need for it.
Well, here's to add some more credentialization to exactly what you just said. I'm gonna share a couple stats that back this up, right? So this is from the Balanced Scorecard Collaborative and the Global State of Strategy and Leadership Survey report. 95% of the typical workforce does not understand its organization strategy. 95%.
Man.
You know what I take from that? That means only 5% of the people know what the hell is going on and actually know what the strategy is, right?
I'm actually surprised that 5% would know, given some of the interviews you and I have done of late.
Exactly. So here's another one. 90% of organizations fail to execute their strategies successfully. 90%. So that tells me, one, if only 5% of the people know what the hell is going on in the first place, no wonder the fail rate is 90%. But exactly what you just said, I think, is why strategies fail. And whether you're, here's the other thing with defining successful outcomes. You can look to have like a hockey stick type of approach, right? Where you have this interjection that's immediate and sustained. But I've only seen that hockey stick approach work for like a quarter or two. It doesn't have longevity because the introduction of what drives that hockey stick is so different than what's going on right now that you're kind of like, I don't like to use this word, but like disruptive, but it's usually not sustainable because the activities that are causing this disruption are not sustainable by nature. And so some businesses need that though. And now typically what we see is there's a lot of potential in organizations. And so if you find a way to shift your company culture and you form the right habits and you have more sustainability and this culture of defining successful outcomes and then aligning the individual departments and the contributors, the teammates on each of those departments, which, by the way, here's the other stat I'm going to give you. 54% of respondents reported poor vertical alignment. So when we talk about poor vertical alignment, that's departments, whether it's HR, whether it's recruiting or delivery operations, etc. And so if you have a mechanism that allows to clearly define a successful outcome, and then you carve out, through your matrices organization, your leadership in each of these vertical alignments departments, give them personalized goals that roll up to the successful outcome that the C-suite has defined. That's how you, one, introduce culture change, is the methodology of how you execute the tactics that form that strategy, right? And then how do you measure that so that way everybody knows what their contribution is and how they can improve or seek to ask for help on the areas that they feel they have deficiencies in. And that helps them build a good culture that's communicative and on the same page and doesn't allow for you to have 95% of the typical workforce does not understand its organizational strategy.
No, and I think it's really important. I think one of the things as we finish here, I just, stepping back, it's what is success? Can an organization have a clear vision of what is success or a mission that represents success that everybody in the organization can go, I understand what that is, and I understand how my role impacts that. That's a really powerful leadership thing. And I think missing in a lot of places, there's an assumption that everybody knows, right? And the answer is no, everybody doesn't know. And if you're not clear about what it is, they don't know. Old expression, but it's a really good one, is that, ships don't sink at one end. And this is this kind of concept of you can have people sitting in the middle going, hey, yeah, I'm meeting all my targets. What do you mean we're not being successful as a business? And you're kind of like, well, wait a minute. If you're meeting your target and your upstream and your downstream internal, vendor and customer is struggling, then something is wrong. There's something out of sync with what you're doing, because if your downstream customer, your internal customer, is not being successful with your output, then you're giving them the wrong things or they're not using them correctly. And that's about communication. That's about effectiveness. It's about vision setting, et cetera. So,
Yeah, and it all starts with defining successful outcomes right at the top, right? And so
yep.
I would leave with this and wrap up with this then. Exactly what you just said. I think a lot of leaders out there right now are trying to apply things that have worked in the past for them that got them into leadership positions. The thing that they're missing is evaluating the environmental factors that they're facing right now, which in my opinion, and I have objective data to back this up too, they're way more complex. We're facing such a level of complexity right now on labor and talent access, logistics. I can go on and on. I know we're trying to wrap up, so I'm not. But you've got to step back and say, okay, let me use my knowledge, draw on my knowledge that made me a leader, that got me to a leadership position. But let me evaluate the circumstance of the decision making criteria that got me there in that time frame. Are the circumstances the same? And if they're not, let me draw on the experience from that, but let me go out and talk to my team, the team that's facing it right now. You're going to be closer to that team, and they're going to help you solution what needs to be done with the current factors that you're facing right now to help you execute on, after you defining what a successful outcome is, executing on the tactics that roll up to make that successful outcome achieved.
I agree. And again, I really appreciate your time again, Andreas. It's I think this is a really important topic, and I'd be really interested in people's feedback on it. But the question I would ask you, as an organization or as part of an organization, do you feel like you have clear visibility to what success is and how you contribute to that success? And with that, I'd like to say thanks again for joining us, Andreas. Anything you want to close with?
No. Again, if you can't tell, both of us are really passionate about this particular topic, and I think it is, if you're able to solve for this and exactly what we just talked about, right? I think you're on the path to a much better, smoother organizational adaptation to what we're facing right now. So let us know how we can help. Give us a shout out and let us know. Let us know also if you think it's stupid. I mean, part of where we come up with the title of stop doing stupid stuff. Let us know what your feedback is in here. We greatly appreciate it. But hey, great conversation as always, Tim.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we appreciate it. Thanks for listening. We'll take care. See you at the next SDSS podcast.
Thanks all.